In this tutorial, I'll introduce the definition of conditional probability. This definition will help us develop some general rules of probability. I'll also venture into the probabilities of combined events. So, what is conditional probability? Let's start with a couple of questions. If you roll 2 dice, what's the probability of getting a sum of 7? If you roll 2 dice, what's the probability of getting a sum of 7 given that one of the dice shows a 5? The second question imposes a condition. One die shows a 5. In other words, we're given additional information about the rolls of the dice. A condition such as this forces us to adjust our probability calculations. If we just ask about the probability of getting a sum of 7, the sample space is composed of 36 elements, 6 possible outcomes on each of the 2 dice. When we ask about the probability of getting a sum of 7, given that one die shows a specific number, we're still rolling 2 dice, but we're no longer interested in all 36 possible outcomes. The condition has effectively reduced our sample space from 36 possible outcomes to just those outcomes where one of the dice shows a 5. It turns out there are 11 such outcomes. We can think of probability as a relative frequency, so the answer to the first question would count the number of ways of getting a sum of 7 from 36 possible outcomes. The answer to the second question would count the number of ways of getting a sum of 7 from the 11 possible outcomes in which one of the dice shows a 5. The usual tip-off that you're dealing with a conditional probability is the use of the phrase, given that. Here are some typical examples of conditional probability situations. What's the probability that I'm over 50 years old, given that I'm over 40 but less than 60? I flip 3 coins. What's the probability that I get at least 2 heads, given that I get at least 1 head? What's the probability that I've got a particular disease, given that I tested positive for that disease? Given my training, there's an equal probability that I'm an engineer, a teacher of mathematics, a statistician, or a professional basketball player. Given that the basketball thing didn't work out for me, what's the probability I'm a statistician? Conditional probability is symbolized as follows. This is red, the probability that A occurs given that B has occurred. If I flipped 3 coins independently, the probability of getting at least 2 heads, given that I got at least 1 head, could be symbolized like this. How would you interpret this statement? This statement says you're interested in the probability that today is Monday, given that it's neither Saturday nor Sunday. Can you see that you'd base your calculations on 5 possible outcomes rather than on 7?